All right, so let me just give a chance, just as you have requested. Um, so what I'm going to do is that I actually still have an intention of teaching us the other method of creating pivot reports outside the one we did in the last class. So let me just spend the first 30 minutes to see how far I can go with the beginning part of it again. Let me see if I can get the slide. I think it was on pivot table. Okay. So actually we started looking at pivot table, pivot table as one of the most powerful Excel statistical function, which is mostly used for descriptive and diagnostic analysis. So in other words, it consists of various exploratory functions which can be used to explore insights from a given data set. But one thing we must understand is that it is a statistical function. And I describe it as the powerhouse of most of the business analytics statistical functions in Excel. So in other words, it comprises so many aggregate functions which can be used to explore data for insights that could influence decision making. Just to have the proper definition, I did said that a pivot table in Excel is a powerful tool used to summarize, analyze, explore, and present large amount of data in a simplified and interactive way. So the keywords are the one that I bulleted: summarize, analyze, explore, and present. And then at the end, I said interactive way. I took my time to explain what some of these keywords represent in the field of data analytics, starting from the interactivity or the interactive. That simply means that you can create a communicating dashboard. In other words, a dashboard that can comprises of different report model and can be regulated with the help of a slicer, which we also talk about. Then I also said that with the help of the pivot table, you can easily summarize a large data, provided it's within the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet capacity. It can summarize it and help us to identify the trend, the pattern. Of course, we can use it to derive insights that can influence decision. We can use it to exploit the data. So that was how I explained the pivot table. So I also talk about I also looked at it from different perspective. So this is just like the summary section of it, where I simply said pivot table allows us or you to automatically sort and count data. I also talk about organizing data by categories. So what does that mean to us? I have mentioned it before that uh, the whole of data analysis can be, let's say, descriptive analysis can be divided into two. presentation of insight. It's either you present your insights categorically or single metric. What it means is that categorical analysis presentation is actually a summarizing set of values against some unique variables in your data set. For example, if I'm to use the Amazon data which we have been using, if I am asked to summarize all this against unique region, that type of analysis is called categorical analysis or comparison analysis. Now, there is also analysis that can be performed whereby somebody will just ask you, what is the total profit generated from all the city, sorry, from all the region or all the country. So that is going to be a single metric analysis. That is, at the end of the day, you will have something like total profit is equals to one line value. So that is what we are talking about. So when it comes to categorical analysis, that is, you are summarizing values against unique variable in your data set, that is referred to the category or the categorical analysis. So I also pointed out that with the pivot table, you can easily calculate totals, average, percentage. Then with the pivot table, you can quickly answer questions like, so these are just perceive and assume questions, just for us to know, okay, what kind of question. It might not tally with the data we are working with. I just want us to know some of the kind of question you can actually answer, or you can answer with the pivot table in a given data set. So questions like, what is the total sales per region? So that is exactly the categorical analysis that I just spoke about. Questions like, how many products were sold by each salesperson? So which means that there will be a column where different sales personnel will have been recorded. And we want to know the aggregate of some certain values that can be attributed to each of them. So if you look at these two questions, the first one, we eventually use a pivot table function called sum to look at it when you say what is the total. And the second one is going to use the count function. So that's actually aligned with my initial definition where I said pivot table is a statistical powerhouse in Excel, and it is recognized as the most powerful exploratory or descriptive analysis function in Excel. So I also went further to talk about the key component of a pivot table. Now, there is a reason why I'm trying as much as possible to establish all these facts, because by the time I go into the practical aspect, you will see that your inability to interpret what is row, columns, value, filter will have a way of affecting your performance in using the pivot table. So like I've explained here, I said when you insert a pivot table, you will see four main areas, such as row, columns, value, and filter. So here I am taking my time to break them down so that you understand the role of each of them, and then know the type of data to assign to each of them. Let me simply start with the row. Now, the row helps us to group data based on, or group data based on the horizontal. Now, the way I summarize it for proper understanding is that we actually develop pivot reports using the headers in the data set involved. So if that should be the case, you have to know which of the header to be allocated to the row area and the header to be allocated to the column area and then also to the values area. And I said that you don't talk about filter until you have created at least a pivot report, because our filter helps us to narrow our analysis to an individual or collective variable in the entire report. So the explanation I gave is that I believe we should just understand the definition. The best place for you to understand this is when we start practicalizing it. But at this point, we should just know that row help us to group data based on row or by rows, while column, the same thing, and then value, that is where you are to assign your number or integer based value for the calculation. Now, we also talk about some benefits of pivot table. So all this just to encourage you to see the need for you to adopt it when analyzing data with advanced Excel. So I said it is very easy to use. What makes it easy to use? Because it does not require even a single formula. You don't need a formula to use pivot table. And then another thing again that I mentioned as one of the benefits of using pivot table is that it saves time on manual summary. Now you can see where we are coming from. I deliberately took us through that journey of using sum if individually, count if individually, average if. You notice the stress that we went through. We have to start tracing column, tracing this, tracing that, before we could get the result we got. But with pivot table, that can be easily done. Allow filter, sorting, and read-through into data. You're going to see all this. Then support multiple calculation, like I've explained before, because it houses some of these functions which can easily be used for statistical or exploratory analysis. So now let's quickly go into the application. So I just want us to have a background by explaining all this. Now going into the main data and see how as data analysts we can actually use pivot table to draw meaningful insight that could influence decision making. Don't forget that is why we exist, to help companies to reprocess their data, hunting for insight, identifying trend, pattern, outliers that could be used or considered before making sensitive decisions. So let's assume that we are analyzing this data for a real organization. Let's assume you were given this data as a data analyst. Don't forget what we said, that you take time to study the data. But I know this is a data set we have been working with. I believe we all understand the data. But just a quick recap on some of the features or headers I shall be focusing my analysis on. I am going to be working with region. Why? Because under region, I have so many categorical data that will make sense of my analysis. Then I'm going to also use country because I also have categorical values there. Then item type, I also have categorical value. Then sales channel, I also have categorical value. How do you know categorical value from unique value? You check what you have here, order ID. These are unique value. These are not categorical value. So it is sometime when you are performing your analysis, Your analysis question will be very weak if you are relating with what? Unique value instead of what? Categorical value. Now, how do I know that this is a categorical value header? You can see that what? There are number of times most of the values there are repeated. Like I have offline, I have online, I have offline, I have online. That itself tells me that what? It is a categorical data. The same thing here, the same thing here, the same thing here. So in terms of string variable, I am going to work more within this area. So most of my aggregate analysis will be within this aspect. Then let me look at the numerical value that I will also focus on. Now, if you look at this, like I told you before, always put yourself in the shoe of a CEO. So Adibin, you are the owner of this company. Where do you think more of your interest will be? Your interest, number one, will be here as a business owner. You will always want to know what your profit is all about. And then the second one will be what? Revenue. You always want to know how much the revenue you are getting. And then if I should look at another one, I think this my interest can also be here, which is units sold. Probably this is where you are highlighting how many of them were sold. So this can give us a better statistics for influencing smart decision making. So based on this, without wasting our time, I want to write down some questions, which I said should be the order of applying pivot table. Never approach pivot table when you have not identified your questions. Otherwise, you just get there and be confused. So let's grab this question together. If you have your pen with you there, you should write them down because at some point, I may not be coming back to the data. So my first priority is aggregates. I'm going to work with a single metric value first. The first priority is analyze the total sum of total profits. So that is going to be my first analysis, the first question I want to answer. Now, the answer, the result to that question is going to be single metric results. Single line metric results. How do I know? Because I am going to simply sum up everything and then display the value. Now, the idea is that I am going to use all this to form pivot table card. Pivot table card. So I am borrowing that word card from Power BI, where we have card at the top. But for now, let's know it as a card. So what is a card? Card is an analysis model. Card is an analysis model which is used to present single value analysis. Single value analysis. So I am going to answer 3 to 4 card questions. So the first one is I am summarizing the total profits. The company wants to know that would influence one of their decisions. The second question is they are also interested in knowing the total revenue. So it's going to be what I can twist it as I want. What is I am writing them down. You can do the same. What is the total revenue generated? What is the total revenue generated? Okay. Now, all these questions, you are supposed to use PowerPoint. I think, let me see if I can even do that. Let me see how fast I can go with the writing. Hmm. Okay, so I think I should be able to. So analysis, single metric, analysis, questions. Single metric analysis question. Let me format it to the color that is more visible. So I'll just go to Insert and select Text Box. So the first question is, say Q1 is, like I've written here. Let me try and shorten it. What is the sum of total profits? What is the sum of total profits? So that is my first question. So let me enhance it a little for us to see it. So Control D to duplicate it. The second question is going to be, what is the sum of total revenue? Total revenue. System is hanging. Total revenue generated. Let me make it more descriptive. From all the country. So like I said, I am targeting 3 to 4 cards. Single metric analysis. Number 3, let me just go back to the data set just to get this third question is, what is the company wants to know the sum of total costs. The sum of total costs. What is the sum of total costs? Total costs. So let me just put here. All right. So for now, let's work with this. So I will definitely come back. Come in. Let me save this somewhere within my system. Questions. All right. Now we have identified our question. Now we can proceed to the pivot table to answer this question. So this is the order you are to follow. Take time to identify the question you actually want the command to answer for you. Now, steps on how to apply the pivot table. I told them in that class that there is a recommended data format. There is a recommended data format, which is the best format for implementing pivot table. And the reason I gave was that it enhances updation. That is to keep updating. Because the question you have to ask yourself is that at the moment you are developing the pivot table dashboard, you need to find out if they have come to the end of the data entry, or if the data sheet will receive more entry after your analysis. So if the question is still an ongoing data collection, they have not come to the end of data collection, then you should always create room for updating new entries. And that is why it is recommended you format whatever data you want to use for generating your pivot report as table. So what is a table? Table in this context, they are predefined or pre-designed styles. Pre-designed styles. So these are some formatting that have been programmed that we are just unleashing on the data set. Now, the advantage is that those formats are already embedded in them, the filter command. So how do we format our data as table? That's the first thing we learned. I said simply select the entire data frame. So I'll start from the first header, hold down the control and the shift, and then of course your right arrow button and then your down arrow button. It does not really matter whether, since we are creating rule for future, it does not matter whether you are extending your selection till the last row or not. That is exactly what we are trying to capture. A format that once a new record comes in, it will automatically invoke the existing format. So if you don't format the data before using it to generate pivot report, sir, will I get results? Yes, you will, but it will not facilitate updating new entry. That is just duplication. Now, once you have selected the area of your data, which is now known as your data frame, then you go to Home tab. From Home tab, you are going to see Format as Table. You can see the option here. So once you drop it, you will see different style, pre-style, like I earlier defined, that these are already made style that we are inheriting on our data, because we understand that this style have been built with a format that enhances pivot report updation. So the whole of these are actually categorized into 3 to 4 sections. We have the whole of these ones under light, and then we have this under medium, we have this under dark. So you can choose actually from any category. So I'm choosing from here, and now you can see that the entire data has not been formatted as table. Okay, so if for example you want to print now, you know that by default, if you have not implemented anything like this or borderline, a cell worksheet will not print your grid line by default. So if I try printing, you will see that automatically the whole record is now in tabular format. So if you are asked to process something like this in Microsoft Word, and you understand that in a cell, once you have inputted the value, you can just switch to format as table, and that automatically translates it to a table. It might be faster for you to do some of those work you do in Word. Okay, so but in this case, I have explained why we need it. So once your data is in the right format, the next thing to do is to proceed to the pivot table. And where do we get the pivot table? Here, you go to Insert. So from Insight, I explained to them that there are 2 ways you can actually implement pivot table. Is either you generate your pivot report manually. That is where this area that I talk about will come in. So I'll bring us back here in a moment. So it is when you are creating the pivot report that you will involve this area that we spoke about. So if I'm to go back there, like I said, this one is just like an AI version, which once your data is selected, it will automatically synchronize and suggest some possible analysis question, just like the function is reading your mind ahead. So it is now left for you to look at whatever report it must have generated and check whether it actually aligns with your intention. If they do not, Then, with the knowledge of the manual method, you should know how to what? To redefine the model. So that is why we are starting with this. Now, let's look at how do I manually as I use the headers in my data set to create pivot reports. So you click, remember, you go to Insert, select Pivot Table. Once you click, a dialog box like this will be prompted. Just a minute. So a dialog box like this will be prompted. Then you are expected to study the dialog box and know what you have to do per time. So let me just explain here. Select a table or range. So which is what? You can see this selection going on, which has automatically defined. That is why we selected the data before applying this. So you have nothing to do here. If you have not, you click here and go and highlight the area you want to involve with. Then choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. So this is talking about the location. Where exactly do you want the pivot table to be projected or to be outputted, the pivot report we want to create? Then I explained that we have an opportunity to choose either new worksheet or existing worksheet. And I recommended that as professional, you stay on the first option, which means that your pivot report will be separated from the source data, okay, which is the best practice. But most time, learners will prefer going through this one because they want to be seeing the way the data will be changing while they are slicing across their reports. Okay, so that is not for learning sake. For learning sake, had even you are mandated to use this. Let me just use one, and then I'll redirect myself to this because this is the one I want to use because I would like to use this report, these questions answer to form a dynamic and an interactive dashboard. So let me just go through this just to show us how this works in case you want to use it. Now, once you click here, it will activate your cursor in this location text box, which means that you are expected to specify within the same data sheet where do you want the report to be created. Of course, the report cannot overlap any of these values. So once you have clicked inside here, you scroll down. So in this case, my data stop here. So I can decide to leave two columns just to separate my pivot report from the data source. So I can just say, okay, by clicking here. So selecting here means you have chosen the location within the same sheet where the report will be created. So once I click OK, you see that what? An empty report has been what? Generated. An empty report has been generated. So like I was explaining to us, these are the four areas that I highlighted in my slide. You can see it's column, value, row, and filter. And I advise that you have no business talking about filter when you have not generated a report. You can see currently it's saying that to build a report, choose field from the pivot table field list. So which means that currently my report is empty. It's waiting to receive data. Okay, now for me to know how do I allocate which of this header I am to either put here or put here or put here, because your knowledge of managing this section is what actually determines the quality of reports you end up generating. That at the end you will draw your conclusion from and present your findings to the stakeholders for decision making. Any question first before I proceed? Do we have question?
No, I don't know. Okay, so if you don't have questions, so let me just continue. So now I am going back to the question. This is how you work. Once you get to the part where you want to start generating your report, you capture your question. The first question we want to answer is that what is the sum of total profit? So which means practically what the company wants us to do is to add all the values here. Now, that question only requires one field, one data field, which is total profit. So what I'm going to do is that, and the type of data under that feature that is involved are integer or float. Let's just say numbers, they are not text. So based on that, anything number, this is where it should come. Anything text can come here, but when you put it here, you have a horizontal report. When you put it here, you have a vertical report. So based on that, I will scroll to where I have that header, then drag it and add it here. So this is the answer. So what I've done, I just analyze the sum of total profits. And this is a single metric analysis. This is not comparison analysis. You are not comparing this value to one list of countries. It's just one, just like total, which is one of the kind of analysis I said we can perform with the pivot table. And this one is called card because you are outputting single metric value. So this is card. So, but remember I said I am not actually working with this. I'm not working with this. So just give me a few seconds. I'll be back. Okay, so like I was explaining, so we have just created one pivot report, but I'm not working with this. So I'll simply go back to the entire data selection and then go back to the inserts and then click on this. Then instead of choosing new worksheets, instead of choosing existing worksheet, because I just needed us to understand how to implement this option. Like I said, this is the professional option. This very one, so that you can have your pivot reports different from your data source. So you select the new worksheets and then you click OK. So that automatically will project your report into a different sheet, as you can see. So right now, I have this as my dashboard. So I'm going to name this as my analysis dashboard. Let me just put it that way. Analysis dashboard. While this will remain the data itself, where we are getting the insert from. So like I did the other time, I will look at the question again. Now, but before then, the whole of this is a dashboard. So being a dashboard, you need to make sure that it is user-friendly. You need to make sure that what is properly designed. Okay, so the colors you use here matters. The formatting of your dashboard matters a lot. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is to go to Insert. I want to give an impression that once someone gets to this particular sheet, they should know what this sheet was used for. So I will title the whole of this as, just like we named it, Analysis Dashboard. Analysis Dashboard. Analysis Dashboard. Now, I can improve the formatting by choosing the right color you want to work with. So let me use this color. And then I want to silence the whole of this area where I have that graphic text. So all I will do is just to highlight across those cells, and then just to highlight across those cells, and then fill it with color. I'll call to my pick color command. So I'll look for color that will bring out the text I am placing there. So I just need something, smart. And when you are building your dashboard, please make sure that you don't use too many color. So you have to choose your color professionally. So I save. Now, let me go back to the report generation to answer the question. Now, you will notice that those areas have disappeared just because I'm no longer on the pivot report. So one pivot table. So once I click, then they will automatically pop out. And don't forget, I also explained there are times that you might go to design, or let's say pivot table and analyze, and turn off this particular feature. So if you turn off this feature, even if you click here, you may not, or you will not find them. So until you come here, in other words, this is what determines whether your headers, your pivot table field, which are the header, will display or not. So like I did the other time, the first question is to create a card analysis where we are outputting the total sum of profit. So even if you click here, just by checking it here, it pivot table knows where to add it based on the type of values here. So not until you drag it. So now that has automatically what? Outputted the result. And I also explained that you can modify your output description. So what is currently telling us is what sum of total profit, which align with exactly how the question was put to us. So there might not be need for us to change it, but for any reason, in case probably maybe you want to delete one of this section, or you want to redefine your analysis question, all you need is just to select the cell holding it and then click here, highlight, or delete it and type your text. So like I said, your formatting matters a lot. So I want to apply some formatting here. So I will drag this down because I discovered that it's cutting across my header section. So I'll fill the whole of it just to balance this. Okay, so I will just come here. Now, all I'm going to do is to display this in a proper monetary value, because this is just like general value. There is no comma separating thousands from 10. So what will I do? What I will simply do is to click on the value. Once you select the value, you check your home, you will see comma here. So I could just add what? Comma. So with that, I have formatted it as monetary value. Then if I want to also improve the appearance, which I say is also very important, so you choose your color set. What are the type set of colors you are working with? That is what actually beautify your dashboard. It's not a matter of using too many colors. Okay, so I'm using this and probably what? White. So what I'm going to do is just to frame the whole of this area with borderline. So I will just highlight those two cells that I use and then go to border here and then choose all borders just to put them in what? Frame, because at some point I may turn off this grid line. So I have just answered that question. Now, if I go back to my PowerPoint where I have listed my card question, I have the next question as what is the sum of total revenue generated from all the countries? So this is another card analysis. So how do I answer this question? How do I answer this question? So I have to go back to, I have to copy the whole of this model. Now, why I am copying this model, if I do not want to copy this model, I ought to have gone back to the data set go back to insert, then pick this again. Now, this time around, you cannot use new worksheet. The reason is that you have already created a new worksheet where you are currently organizing your findings, your report. So if you go with this option, it means you are going to create another sheet, which means that all your pivot reports will now be scattered across different sheets, which is not advisable. Because if they are not in one sheet, all your reports, they are not in one sheet, it will be difficult for you to regulate them with your slicer. Okay, so for that reason, I have already gotten my new worksheet. So I will now click on this so you can see the scenario where you will use this now. So once you click here, you will now go back to that very new one where you are already assembling your report. So you click here, then you now specify where do you want this second report to come in. So I would like to have a horizontal card because I'm going to have the categorical analysis under the card. So what I'm going to do is that I will leave one column for that. I'll leave one column for that, but let me output the answer first. So I'll click here. So I'm selecting here. I'm leaving this just to form a design. And then you click OK. So it will output it like this. So just like what you did, you have to add the header that will answer, that will summarize the required value, which is what the total revenue. So like I said, you can simply just check it or you drag it and add it here. So I've also analyzed that. Okay, so now if I have formatted, at this moment, I'm not focusing on formatting. I am just focusing on generating my reports. When I'm done with that, I can take them one after the other and start formatting them. Okay, now the third question is, what is the sum of total cost generated from all countries? From all countries. So here we are focusing on what? Total cost. Now, if I don't want to go through the data set just like I did now, before I can get this sorted out, I want to show us the fastest way you can do that. But before that, I want to change the alignment of this. So let me see if I can change the alignment to this or center. Okay, that is already at the center. So let me work on this. Okay. So also bold it. Okay. Now, what I will simply do to save my time is to copy the model that I've used before. Now, what I am answering is the sum of total cost. What I answered here is the total sum of what? Revenue. Okay, so what I will simply do is to highlight these two cells, then Control C to copy, and then select where you want to paste it, Control V. So what you have done, is just like you duplicated this because you are having the same analysis, so you escape. So the only thing I'm going to do is to change the header that generated this. Here I was actually analyzing total revenue, but my intention is to use this to analyze total cost. So the first thing I'm going to do is to change this description to what? Total cost. So once I've done that, I will now come to my analysis area and drop the total revenue. So I will locate it here and uncheck it. That means what? You have dropped it. And then you pick what? Total cost. Let me look for it here. You pick total cost. So with that I've saved you from going back to the data and then bringing it here just like the way we did it now. Please, I want to find out if that is clear to us. Did we understand that concept? In fact, did we understand the both concepts?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this is still what? Single metric analysis. This is known as card analysis. Now, I want to add additional one. So let me go back to my data and see which other card analysis I can perform. So let us assume that we are also asked to sum up what the unit costs, just to have the fourth card. So like I did the other time, so I'm going to bring this one from there so that we can have an opportunity to go through it again. So I'm going back to my data. I'm going back to my data, and then from my data, I'm going back to insert. I'm selecting the pivot table again, and then, but I'm choosing what? Existing sheet. Then go back to the dashboard. Go back to the dashboard. Then specify the location where you want to output it, and then click. So that has generated what? An empty report. So what I will do, I will simply drag the unit cost and add it to the value section. So I've also analyzed that. So it's either you follow this way or you simply copy an existing model and then switch the what? The header. So whichever way you think is better for you, just to have all the values formatted uniformly. I said you can just click here and then go back to your home, select format, and then touch the cell you want to give the same appearance. These are some of the techniques we learned in that section. Now, the formatting now, I will highlight the whole of this place. It's just a design. It's just a design. You are only trying to engage those areas just to form a design. Okay. Now, let's quickly look at some categorical analysis. That is where the main analysis will be done. So everything I've done here is just like card analysis, single metric analysis. All right. So now let me go back to the data set and be able to draft some categorical analysis. So if you look at our data set here, if you look at our data sets, you look at the data sets, the analysis we have done so far is just like total. Now we want to perform comparison or categorical analysis. And what does that mean? I just hope I'll be able to explain the communication in a way you understand it. What you have done here, there should be a driving force. There should be a factor that will determine your categorical analysis. For example, let me just focus on this. The analysis you did here is the total profit generated from all the countries. Now, you want to get the breakdown per country that amount to this value, the breakdown per country. So in other words, this categorical analysis is an extension of this, just like we are detailing each of them, because this is just like one value analysis. So my second question, or my first question under this comparison analysis, looking at this, just to have more attractive and more meaningful analysis, I will say analyze. In fact, let's go to the PowerPoint. So I will say, let me duplicate this, Control D. Let me start by describing the type of analysis I'm doing. Categorical analysis. So the first question is, what is or let me just shorten it, summarize total profit per country. So this is my first question. Now, I'll go back to my dashboard, going back to the data sets, click on Insert. Then, this time around, I want to show us the logic behind recommended. But if I'm using recommended option, it will, let me see, continue with this. I'll come back to that. So when you click here, I will also specify existing worksheet because I have my dashboard already projected. So I will specify where exactly do I want to display my results. Go back to my dashboard. I would like it to come here. I want to leave this as gap between the first report and this one. Now I'll click OK. Now, in terms of this type of analysis that we want to perform, we are comparing the sum of total profit per the unique country. So this is working with two variables, the dependent variable and the independent variable. In other words, the values in total profit depend, the addition of the values in total profit depends on the selected country. So that is one fact you must get first. Now, once you acknowledge that, the next thing you're going to ask yourself is this. Where will the country header go between column and row? And where will the what? The profits, the total profit go? Of course, it can only come here. So where you have issue is column and row. So now, like I said, you always start with the string variable. This question mentioned country and total. Totals are number, country are text. So you start by analyzing the text. Text is country. So if I add the country here, I want you to watch the kind of analysis you are going to get. It's going to list them horizontally. Now, if I move it from column and put it under row, it will give me what? Vertical what? Analysis, which I consider the what? To the best, to be the best what? Detailing presentation. Now, there is issue here. The countries are actually much. So let me change my analysis question to region because I have few regions. So let me turn off that and turn on region so that I just want us to be able to see the whole of our values. Now I'll click here and change the description because this is not describing this. This is supposed to be region. So I'll click and change it to what? Region. Okay, so I've edited that. Now, the next thing I want to do, what this analysis did by just adding the region in the row section is just to list out the unique value. So which means that if I am asked how many regions are in the Amazon data, I will just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is an observation. So you write it down somewhere in your PowerPoint that after your analysis, you discover that what there are sales cut across several regions. Now, the next one is to aggregate the value in total profit against. So you can see the reason why we said this is aggregate analysis or comparison analysis, because at the end of the day, this is where trend will come in. You can see that here there's no issue of trend, which one is the trending, because this is just one metric analysis. But here, issue of which one is doing better, which one is underperforming, what is the pattern of the differences will arise because you are performing comparison analysis. So now the next header that is involved is the total profit. So I will add it to this. Okay. So what pivot table has done is what you did, what you achieve with sum if. when we were still under the conditional function. So within how many seconds? We did not write any function. We did not write any formula. And we have obtained what? Maximum results. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to do is to format the whole of this, highlight the whole of this, like I did the other time. Go back to your home, and then under this section, select all border. I just want to make sure that they are wrapped in a tabular format because, like I said, when I'm done, in order to have a more user-friendly interface, I'm going to disappear all the grid lines. So this border that I'm activating will make each of them to stand out. So I have answered one question, okay? Now, the next thing I want to show us is how to, before I answer the second question, how to sort pivot table report values. How to sort pivot table report value. Now, there is an analysis question that I can answer only if or easily answer only if I get this whole value sorted. Now, like I said, after you have generated your report, there is another question that has arisen now because I told us from the beginning that when you are performing descriptive analysis, it will always pose another question called what happened? And for you to know what happened, you must identify the trend, the most performing variable, or the most reoccurring variable in that data set. So for me to do that, if I do not sort this record, this report, it means that if I'm looking for the highest performing region, I am going to be comparing this value with this value, compare that same value with all this value. So that is considered to be a waste of time. So what you do is that you right click on any of these values. It's not compulsory you select all of them. Just right click on any one of them. Just right click on any one of the pivot report. You will see sort here. And then you specify whether ascending or descending. But in this case, I want largest so that I can identify what? The highest. So you can see that what? Observation. So you go to where you are compiling your observation after sorting. Observation is what? Sub-Sahara Africa has the highest generated what? Profit with the sum of, to write it down. The next assignment, which is tomorrow, if I do not have this, I don't think I will continue. Okay? So you can see the way I'm doing it now. So you have to create PowerPoint slide. At the end of each report like this, I want you to write down your observation, just like the way I am communicating it now. After sorting, what did you observe? The highest is what? Sahara Africa. Put it in writing. You are going to present it tomorrow. Then remember that you need to also identify the outlier or correlation. And for you to know your outlier or correlation, you should know the list. Now that you have identified the highest. So the list is, now you can see that I will find it a little bit difficult to understand the lists because they are in a tabular format. So now I will now bring in what we call a pivot table charts. Pivot table chart, which I also capture in one of the slides here. I think there is a place where I capture pivot table chart. Let me see if I can have it here. Pivot table charts. Good. Under advanced, let me quickly take us there in order to have the proper definition. So these are the, I'm still coming to that. I'm still coming to this. I have pivot table chart somewhere. I know I have it. Check. Pivot table chart. Okay, this is it. So pivot table chart. A pivot table chart, also called a pivot chart in a set, is a dynamic chart. In other words, as the value changes in the table, the chart will also what? Change. Is a dynamic what? Chart that is directly linked to a pivot table. So in other words, you must have a pivot table before you can generate pivot charts. Okay? It visualizes the summarized data from the pivot table and updates automatically when you change or filter the pivot table. So just for us to understand that, now let's go back to the report where I intend to use it. Why do I want to bring in pivot chart? Because I was able to identify the what? The trend, the highest. But I am finding it difficult to identify what? The lists, just because I am presenting my report with a table model instead of what? Graphical model. So how do we generate pivot charts so that I can easily know the pattern and then the what? The outliers. So you select one of the reports you have generated, just like we just read now in my slide. Click on one of the reports, and then once you click, you will see a tab called Pivot Table Analyze. Okay? Now, depending on the version you are running, there's a version you will run, you will just see Analyze. There won't be what? Pivot Table attached to it, but it means the same thing. So click on it. Once you click, you will see pivot chart under two sections. Under two sections, you will see pivot chart. So click on it, then it will prompt you different graphical tools for visualizing your numerical data. Now, you have to know per time which graph can be best used based on your niche, your target. Now, we want to identify two things. One, the lowest, then the pattern. Okay, that is what is prompting this pivot chart now. So I will check. If I use pie charts, it might be difficult for me to easily see some of these things that I just mentioned. So let me use bar. Okay, so bar can easily give me what I want. So I will just click OK. So now with my bar chart, you can see that I can easily identify the list to be what? North America. So you go back to your observation slide, which you are going to present tomorrow, and update. I also observe that North America generated the least profit. These are the information. These are the information that will form your executive report, okay, which you are going to present that will influence their decision. They have no business with all this you're working. These are just your abracadabra in order to get those information you are going to put in writing and present to that organization that they will always look up to whenever they want to make effective and smart decisions. So at this point, we should not just be focusing on getting the result. We should always learn to study and bring out some viable word observations. That is the pattern I'm using in this session now. Now, we have identified that. So the next thing I want to identify, I can also identify the pattern. If I am asked, what is the correlation between the highest and the least? The company wants this information before they can take certain decisions. They want to know the margin. So how do you know the margin? Your graph has also what? Pointed it out easily for you. So with my graph now, if I want to know the difference, you will see that when you hover here, you get the value. You write it down in your observation slide. You write that value down, and then you hover on this one and write the other value down. Then you punch your calculator. Okay? If you don't want to punch your calculator, once you identify it here, they are in the table. So you can just write equals to. From what I identify here now is North Korea. Look at it here. We have North America. We want to subtract the value of North America from the value of what? Sub-Sahara. So if I don't want to punch my calculator, I can just come here and just say what? Equals to, then capture this value, then put minus, then capture this value, and then press enter. So this is the correlation. So you put it in writing, and then you delete it after you have got to what you wanted. Then you move on. Any question, please? Any question, please? And I hope you are following. Any question? Any question?
No question.
All right, all right. So I believe you will see that with the video this time around. Now, but we need to also make sure that this graph is visible. This graph is not detailed enough. So you click on the graph. This is what? Pivot chart formatting now. You go to design. From design, you will see some already formats. You can see this one, it appears a little bit more visible than the other one. This is another one. So you can see that this one, all the values are attached, but they are packed because the size. So I can just increase it a little. Sorry. I can just increase it. And I am also mindful of other reports. Now, if you discover that based on this design, the length of this is not giving you the best design, you can put it under its own report. So these are the things you need to make sure that you watch out for when you are formatting. Make sure you have a user-friendly, so I prefer it being here. Now, and I want to make sure that it does not exceed the length of the table, okay? So let me see if there are other things I can actually what? Improve on it. So if I select here, I'll check if the values are more visible. I think with this, the values are more visible. So peradventure, you want to design it the way you want it, okay? So you now come to this section here, and then choose the color. You want to give those bar, maybe the color they came with are not that visible enough. So you can do some, some adjustment in order to have what you want. But if you still want to go ahead with what came out, fine. Okay, so you can also change the layout. Can you see that? I'm changing the layout. But the more you are changing the layout, good. I think this is the best layer. I prefer this because the values are a bit distant from the bars, okay, unlike what I was having before. So I prefer this. Now, I also want you to understand what I'm going to do now. Sometimes you don't need to bring slicer. If I want to analyze one region, if I click here now to bring out all the region, I can filter through this chart by the region that generated it. So if I turn off all this, I can say, okay, I want to see only Asia and what? Australia. If I click OK, you can see this is what the graph is currently presenting. So what I've done now, I have automatically used the graph to do the work of slicer. But that is just for you to know that it exists. Let me put everything back and continue first. Okay, so I have answered that question. So this is a categorical question. So I'm going back to the data again. In fact, I don't need to go back to the data because my card, they are what I am using to generate my categorical analysis. In other words, I am expatiating, I am detailing the card analysis. So here I give the breakdown of how we arrive at this value. So which means you can see that this value is equal to this, which automatically means that inside this value, Sub-Sahara has this. Inside this value, Europe have this. That is what you have just analyzed. Okay, so I want to also detail this. I want to answer another categorical analysis that will break down this. That is, the question is, because of time, question is, summarize total revenue per, let me go back to the data, let me change it. Let's go back to the data. Summarize total revenue. Okay, let me write it down. summarize total revenue per country, sorry, per region, and further break it down. So we are going a little bit advanced here. Further break it down by sales channel, So this is two criteria analysis. So let's see how we are going to answer that question. So now, to avoid wasting my time, instead of me going back to the data, I will just copy this table and use it to answer this question. So I'll copy. So I am putting it, let me adjust this one somewhere here. Where should I output it? Okay, let me output it here. Control V. I am mindful of my design. Okay, perfect. So I will just test wrap this so that everything will collapse inside that cell. Click here, select what? Wrap test, so that everything will be there instead of it extending to the next section. So now, this is the same thing with this, but the question is different. So which means that what I will simply do here, I will drop, I'm retaining region, but I'm dropping what? Total profit. So I'm retaining region because the question says summarize total revenue per region, which means that what? I am retaining region. Then if I go to total profit, I'm dropping it. And then I am activating what? Total revenue. So I have switched now. Now, there is second part of that question that says, okay, now this is the total revenue generated from Asia region. This is the one generated from Australia and what? Oceania, Central America and what? Caribbean. Now, the company wants to know, okay, give me the percentage of, if you come to the data set here, you will see that we have offline, we have online. So the value you have displayed here comprises of both online and offline. But what I want to achieve is give me a sub-analysis that breaks this value down per se channel, which are just two channels. So which means that I will locate where I have set channel, header, then drag it and add it to region section. So you have now automatically what? Breaks it down. So which means that what? Out of that initial value, offline has this, online has it. Observation comes in immediately. Now that you are comparing online, the company want to know, okay, inside this value, you want to know between offline and online sales channel, which one did better. So from the value here, you compare and write it down. Okay, after my analysis, I discovered that Asia generated this, and within this value, offline has this, and then online make this, and then you observe that what online is doing better than, which one is even doing better? Let's check it. Between these two, which one is doing better? I think it's the offline is doing better than the online. So you can collapse by clicking here. You can collapse everything. So it depends on the question you are answering per time that will determine which one you are to expand. Okay? So if at that point, at the moment, the company wants to know, give me the breakdown of that total revenue based on what sales channel under what Europe. So it is the Europe owner that will expand and get my what observation rating, and then I move on. Now there is another question. If the company want to know, okay, list out the result, the report that generated this, the transaction that generated this, just come here and double click. The moment you double click, you have just generated another report now. So this report is different from that report. This is just like, okay, these are the entries for only These are the entries that generated that summation. Please, I need a response here. Did you understand what I just did now?
No. Please, do it again.
Now, this is the sheet it generated. Let me come back to my dashboard. The analysis task here is that, let me pick this value, Asia. What you are saying is that what? The total revenue generated from Asia region, both for what? Offline and what? Online, is this. Out of this value, only offline generated this, online generated this. Then you check which one have the highest. Now, the company now want to know, okay, please, can we see the numbers of transactions that generated this? We want to know whether the reason why this is higher than this, whether it's because of the number of transactions. Please, did you understand that communication first before I continue?
Yes.
Good. Now, to give that breakdown, you just double click on that particular value they want you to give the breakdown. So which is this? I'll just double click. It has given me what? Now you can see only offline, offline, offline. How many entry you observe? There are what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entry generated what? That total. Is that clear?
Yes, it is, but does it mean that when you double click it, we take it to a new sheet?
Sorry?
Does it mean that when you double click, it will take it to a new sheet?
Good.
Or did you highlight the sheet
No.
before doing it?
Perfect question. Once you double click, it will take them from the main data and present them in a different sheet. That is what has happened. In case you want to print them out separately for reporting purpose.
Okay.
So now you can name it. You can name this detail true. This is what we call drill true. Drill true. Look up from my slide, which I can easily get there. There is a place where I said, good, look at this. What I just did now is this. I said, allow filtering, sorting. Remember, I've done filtering. Okay, I've not done filtering. I'm coming to that. I've done sorting. What I did now is this. I have drilled through into the data by just double clicking. That is what you did here now. That is what you drill through the data and bring out what matters to you at that moment. And that has already generated the sheet. So it's not left for you. It's either you cope with this or you can just come here, because what I am currently having here now is just offline. So to guide me better, I will say offline. I will name it offline what? Entries only, or offline analysis. Then this one could be both offline and online. So I'll come back to my dashboard, if that is clear. Now let's quickly look at I can also project the graph of this here. So I'll click on it also. Please, I may have to extend the time with 15 minutes since I just want to complete this topic. Hope you don't mind. Please, let me get the response.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So now, so like I said, I want to also create a graph of this so that I can easily identify my pattern, my trend, and what the outlier of this particular output. So I'll click also, go to this, then select what? Pivot chart. Now, to have a more interactive dashboard, don't use this graph again. Use pie chart so that it will decorate your dashboard. Try and mix them up with different, you can even at some point use line charts just to, to make it look more creative. You can use line charts. So, but in this case, let me use pie chart and then click OK. Then I will take it and put it here. Then there are also already made, if I go to design, just to have access to some, more beautiful one I can easily use. And then I will go to add chart element to display my data label. I want them to be displayed outside, something like this. Then remember I said you should be mindful of your design, form a shape, form creative shape. So I don't want it to exceed that length. So let me try and maintain this. So the next thing I want to quickly show us is the filter, because we have used the value area, we have used the row area, we have also used the column area, but we have not used anything here. So there are questions you can answer with this. Now let me explain the communication to us. What you have outputted here is the total, is a summary of profit per region. Now, the company want to know a particular country, that it was this same report that you have projected. You want to use this same model to filter out for only one country, which means that you want to filter out for like Tuvalu. So if I go back to the data set now, so that you can get the communication right, you see that the regions are made up of what? Different countries. Okay? And at the same time, the report you are giving there is the sum of total profit per region. And in a particular region, we have two values. So let's assume that the company wants to say, okay, we want only reports, only the summary of total profits across this region from what? Maybe a particular country. That is when you use the concept I want to show you now. So I will now drop country in my filter section. So the moment I drop my country here, I want to watch what will happen. We could not insert what? This location. Okay, let me see what would be the issue. Okay, so it's added now. So the moment I add it, country, so as you have the filter activated, let me see. So you have it here. So I can come here. No, this is not what I want. Not what I want. So it added it to this. This is where I actually want it. Let me see what it's saying. If someone can easily adjust. We could not insert your pivot table at the selected location in the sheet analysis dashboard because there is already a pivot table. Okay, let me see if I just want to know. So take this one out. Okay, I believe we are having issue with the model, but let me just try and use it on another one. Let's say on this report. And I want to filter per country. So you can see that it's working here now. So this is actually what we are looking for. I think maybe the way we copy this, or we have done filtering there before. So you can see that it has added the filter. So it's not left for you. Once you click here, you see the list of all the countries based on the field you added to your filter section. I can say, okay, I want to view only what? This particular country in that particular report. So what you have right now is just the summary of total cost for only what? Angola. So if I want to view for another country, so I can select, okay, Monaco, and then click. So this is what you have for Monaco. So you can be writing your observation. Now, how do you select multiple? You click here. Let's assume that within that, I want to analyze both for Angola and what? Australia, and also Australia. There you click. So what you have now is the total, is the sum of total cost from those three countries. So that is the benefit of what? The filter. That is why I told us that until you create reports, you have no business with the filter. So I can decide not to filter. So you can choose I can filter by date. I can add it here, okay, based on a particular date, I want to know the report of that. So this is the report. Particularly this date on is very important. Your boss can come and tell that, okay, we want to get only analysis of a particular date. So let me take it out and check this report, whether it will work here. Add it to my, so we are having issue with this, probably because of the way we copied it, but time will not allow me to rectify that. You can try it in your own case, but at least I've explained it here. So any question so far, any question? As it stands now, I think I will have to stop here and finalize this tomorrow. I wanted to finalize it today, but I don't want it to be too much. I'm going to stop here. So by tomorrow, everybody that will attend that tomorrow class, it's compulsory that you must have given me exactly something more than this, if possible. So by tomorrow, I'm going to teach us how to add we have a lot of exciting topic to look at tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll look at slicer, how we can implement slicer to be able to what? To fetch record, narrow our filtering to a particular variable across all the model. We also look at timeline analysis. We also learn how we can do historical analysis using that function. And then I think that will be the main features we'll be looking at tomorrow. Then we'll do some formatting just to make the dashboard look more presentable, more interactive, and more dynamic. So if there is question, you can ask. Now, there's no question, we end the class. Let's speak out on time, please. If there's question, there's no question, so that I can convert.
No question.
Okay. All right. So please, let's do the assignment. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Welcome.